there, Spire community. I'm Keri, Ladouceur, your host of today's Spire cast, and I'm so excited to be with you. We all know that ministry is challenging, and trying to stay healthy and resilient as a church leader is even more challenging. That's why we have created the Spire cast. Spire wants to provide resources that equip you to lead from a place of wholeness. And we also want to give you the guidance and support to implement the best ideas on ministry resiliency for the challenges that we face as leaders in the church. That's why twice a month, we're bringing you the opportunity to hear from leading experts and give you the chance to ask questions, to have you move forward in the best ministry ideas and have actionable steps to go with those. Today, we're going to be talking with one of my all-time favorite people, Dick Alexander, and we're going to talk about what it looks like to grow through mentoring. Dick has spent almost 50 years in local church ministry. 28 of those years was as the lead pastor at Life Spring Christian Church in Cincinnati. He's currently working with Christian Missionary Fellowship International and regularly coaches pastors through Ascent Leadership. My name is Keri Ladouceur, and I am the community pastor at Community Christian Church in Naperville, also known as the Yellow Box. Hey, Dick, welcome to the Spire cast conversation. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks, Keri. It's great to see you.
It's so good to see you too. Okay, I know we have known one another in a mentoring relationship. We got to coach pastors together for several years, a few years ago. And I have watched you invest a ton of your time in mentoring moments. What has led you personally to see the importance of mentoring?
Well, I think it came out of an empty space in my own life. I had done student ministry for almost 20 years, and then I became a lead pastor, and I thought I was ready to do that. Because I've been on a church staff, I've watched how it all works. I've watched my lead pastor, and so I thought, okay, it's just sliding over a chair. But I didn't realize how different that chair is. And I didn't realize what keeps you awake at night when you're in the lead seat, and the kinds of responsibility you have, the things that you have to work through. And so I realized I needed a mentor, and I started praying for a mentor. And I prayed 2 years for a mentor, somebody who was maybe 20 years older than me, who I could just have coffee or lunch with once a month for a year or so to help get me through that first year or two. And I wasn't able to find that person. And so I just had to find out where the landmines are the hard way. And that caused me to realize this really is important. And also just to decide, if I'm ever on the flip side of this and anybody's asking for help, I will just say yes. It's an automatic yes, because I struggled so hard those first few years. And a mentor, I think, would have helped that a lot.
Yeah. It's good to know, maybe just even as a listener, that you too have struggled.
Yeah.
Okay, I do think the word mentor is kind of a popular word right now, and maybe people have some different ways of defining what that means. When you say mentor or mentorship or mentoring relationship, what do you mean by that when you say that word?
Well, I use it in a really broad way, and I think that's best. Mentor, simply, in its simplest form, is somebody who's a little further down the road. And that doesn't have to be very far. Like in a business environment, I think some of the large companies will assign their younger leaders a mentor, or they'll work to match that up. And it can be somebody who's just 2 years ahead of them, but who's already figured some stuff out. Or it can be somebody who's 40 years ahead. But it really is somebody who's just had more experience with things. And often the mentoring process isn't sharing the here's all I know and everything I have together. It's here's the stupid mistakes I made. And then a person who's not quite to that place yet can avoid those and doesn't
Mhm.
have to step on those landmines, and
Sure.
that can save a whole lot of pain. So it's just somebody who's further down the road. It can be very structured, um, or it's sometimes not structured. Sometimes it's just a person that you get together with occasionally, and that even can be once a year. But an hour once a year with the right person when you're asking the right questions can be just gold. The flip side is it can be much more structured, and it can be once a month. It even for seasons could be once a week. And I think it's not a forever relationship.
Mhm.
It's not something you do for 10 or 20 years. It can be a relationship. Usually it's in a particular season of life, and that can be 6 months or a year. And
Sure.
it can be occasional or it can be structured.
Mhm. Yeah. I have found that's helpful in finding a mentor is being able to say, "Can you help me in these particular areas for
Yeah,
this amount of time?" Right? Because the people you
yeah,
want to be mentored by tend to be really busy and they have a lot on their plate and they are excelling in some area. And
yeah,
so being able to be specific about what you want that investment to be and the time frame is what I'm hearing
yeah.
here.
And if you put it in terms of leader learner, it usually is initiated by the learner. It's by somebody who has a hunger, somebody who feels a need, and they're the ones who will make the approach. And
Sure.
they'll ask, "Can you give me a little bit of time?"
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. What are the biggest challenges that you see church leaders facing when it comes to being able to integrate mentoring into their lives? Maybe what holds people back from finding a mentor, or just what are the challenges you see for them pursuing that?
I think it's usually just busyness. On the part of a mentor, it's busyness. But most people, if asked, and if it is as you described, Keri, for a particular season of time or season of life, most people will try to make room for that because
Mhm.
anybody who leads knows it can be really lonely,
Sure.
and they know the value of it. I think on the flip side, people are sometimes afraid to ask. They
Mhm.
think, oh, she's too busy. She wouldn't do that for me.
Mhm.
When in most cases, the person will. Um, Sometimes there's a vulnerability issue that holds a person back because the great mentoring relationships really are vulnerable on both sides.
Mhm.
Both people are being willing to be transparent. They're willing to open their lives, open their hearts, open their experience, and share in some depth. And that's a big part of what makes mentoring valuable because it really is personalized.
Yeah.
It's one to one, and it can get below the surface in ways that most other relationships can't. So
Mhm.
there's that willingness, and maybe that holds people back sometimes.
Yeah, that's kind of where my mind went is, I've known people that have just not wanted to bring somebody into their struggles or into their
Yeah,
challenges. And so I wonder if sometimes that's fear or that fear of vulnerability, like you said, to want to bring somebody into what's hard, that could be an
yeah.
obstacle to someone benefiting from mentoring.
Well, if you think about it, though, how many people do you know who ever told you that a mentoring relationship went bad because they made themselves vulnerable?
Hmm.
I I don't remember ever hearing that. I never heard
Yeah.
anybody say,
Yeah.
"Wow, I regret that I shared that."
Sure.
Um, it almost always turns out great and
Hmm.
really valuable,
Hmm.
and on both sides, that's true.
Yeah. There's something really powerful about bringing somebody into those struggles. I mean, leadership can be
Yeah,
lonely. And so, to your point, to have someone who's willing to give you sometimes broader perspective than what you can see in the midst of a challenge, or someone who's been through that challenge and has some hindsight, because hindsight is 2020, has some hindsight to offer.
right.
uh, yeah, I think maybe even just somebody hearing that might help them take that step towards pursuing mentorship, to say, hey, it can be scary to be vulnerable, but you're not alone, and you're stronger, you're better when you have somebody in it with you. Yeah.
Betty and I struggled in marriage. It was hard for us. And I think it's hard for almost everybody. I know two couples who I think um, fell in love, got married, and lived happily ever after. All
Only
around.
two.
Yeah, only
Yeah.
two. And that involves quite a few because I've been around a long time.
Sure.
But everybody else has to work at it. And I think that the norm is it'll take couples 20 years to really work out a good marriage. It took us 40. We, we were slow learners, and that's especially true of me. So one point in our marriage when things were, when we were doing fairly well at that point, Betty said, if you ever have the chance with anybody, and this is, she said, privately or publicly, to talk about the challenges of marriage and what we've been through to work it out. She said, you have my carte blanche approval. Any time, if you can spare anybody what we've gone through, feel free to do it.
That's pretty powerful words from your wonderful wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there are lots of ways to grow as a Christian, right? There's resources, there's groups,
Yeah.
there's all sorts of ways to do that. What would you say to somebody listening that is unique about mentoring specifically as a way to grow?
Yeah. One is that it's so personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
It really is personalized to you, and it's timely. We get into mentoring relationships intentionally, and
Mm-hmm.
usually a person seeks out mentoring because they're at some kind of a crossroads or some kind of a stuck spot, and they've tried to resolve it and they can't. And there's a person they believe could help. And so it's like the medicine is applied right to the wound
Mm.
at just the right time. And that's why it fills a spot that something else doesn't. You can go to a conference or a meeting, and listen to a great speaker on a subject, and hopefully you get something that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But then that doesn't always happen. There's another aspect to it. And again, I think mentoring is built around questions. And it's built around questions from both parties. It goes either way. And so maybe the younger person is asking just the right questions, but maybe they're not. And maybe they're not digging deep enough. And there's really a kind of, I'll use the word implied contract that sounds too cold and impersonal because it's all about the relationship. But by entering into that, a person is giving the other the freedom and the invitation really
Mm-hmm.
to ask deeper questions.
Mm-hmm.
So a good mentor has seen enough of life and struggled enough themselves that they can often see the issues that are a layer or two down that aren't yet on the table.
Yeah.
And they can raise those questions and raise them in appropriate, gentle ways that just open up the conversation in a way that the person who initiated it wasn't anticipating or didn't even know to ask.
Yeah.
And a good mentor can sense those questions and ask. And that'll sound scary to anybody listening to this. Like, oh, I'm already hurting. Do I want to risk going deeper? No, that's where the healing is.
Sure.
And what comes out of it is just such a good sense of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. And I'm hearing you say a mentor relationship isn't all just high tell, right? It's not just somebody sitting at your feet telling them the things. You're asking questions. You're helping someone discover something about themselves or about the journey they're on, more so than you're just telling them.
Yeah. Yeah. It is always more about the questions than about the content.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a place for content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways we undervalue content today because we're quick to say, well, nobody has the answers. And even, for instance, in the email setting this up, the word expert was used. And I thought, oh, I don't care to be thought of as an expert about life or ministry. So I think there's a good sense in which we're hesitant to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times where somebody has had some experience and they do know something, and that can be really helpful for us in pointing a direction. But you're
Absolutely.
right. It's not just, it's not at all just about tell.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a mutuality to it that's good.
Yeah. I am really grateful to have benefited from your 50 years of local church ministry in my own life. So I do think if anyone deserves the expert title, Dick, it's you. I'm just going to put that
Yeah.
out there.
You just had to find a way to get that 50 years
One
into,
more time. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's just a little bit longer that I've been alive that you have been
Yeah.
doing what I do for work. So it feels like it's really helpful to benefit from the wisdom
Yeah.
that you bring to that.
Yeah.
Give us, if you would, some really practical handholds on how is a mentoring relationship structured? Like if someone's saying, okay, you've piqued my interest. This sounds a little less painful than I thought. In fact, it might be really beneficial to have someone in my life and in my ministry helping me see what I can't see, asking good questions. Give them some imagination for how mentor relationships are structured.
Yeah. Like every good thing in life, it starts with prayer. And it's prayer that God will bring about a connection that's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also an openness in that prayer that God might take you to a person you wouldn't have anticipated. It might be somebody who at first didn't come to mind. It maybe wasn't a top of mind person, but it's somebody that God knows can be really helpful at that point. And then there's prayer about approaching them. There is an ask in it. And I think you highlighted correctly when that approach is made, that it's asking a person about specific issues and including in it a time frame.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, could we do this for a period of time? And it could initially be just a single time to get together for them with coffee,
Mm-hmm.
with them for coffee. And I had a mentoring relationship that was like that. It was a nationally known Christian leader that I went to at a couple of really difficult spots in ministry. And it happened to be that they were going to be at a conference. I reached out to him ahead of time, said, could I have coffee with you while we're both in the same city? And it was an hour and a half, probably both times. Those are solid gold. They were really priceless.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be something that runs longer than that. It could be, could we do this for a few months or 6 months or a year? And that gives them an idea and an easier way to say yes. It also then can talk about what you view the structure as being.
Right.
Could we do this once a month for a year? And I would just like to bring some questions each time,
Mm-hmm.
but I'd like you to ask me anything you want to ask. Feel free to probe, to dig
Mm-hmm.
deeper in it.
Yeah.
So you lay out some parameters and they will probably have some feedback about that. It may just be a flat, yes, that sounds great. Or what if we did it this way? I feel I could contribute if it was like that.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's helpful. When I have had that question in the past, when someone asks me if I'd mentor them, that's always my first response is, what does that mean to you? Because for someone, it meant coming over and having dinner around our table and being able to ask questions about life. And for someone else, it meant, can we study God's word together? Everyone kind of brings, like we talked about at the beginning, some definition to that. And I have found more success being mentored when I'm able to say, can we meet 3 times over 6 months and talk about
Yeah.
this? Or, and people are more likely to say yes when they understand the expectations with the ask.
Keri, yeah. And can you talk just a little more about that? What made you most likely to say yes to a request?
When I felt like I could meet someone's expectations and what they were asking for, because it just depended on it's always depended on my capacity in a different season. And if I feel like, okay, I can add value and I can enter
Yeah,
into their story, I can't be their boss, and this isn't a coaching relationship, which is
yeah,
different than a mentor relationship, but I can
yeah.
sit and listen and be discerning and ask good questions, and kind of help them with a specific season that they're trying to work through. That's increased my likelihood. And I say yes almost every time.
How is coaching different from mentoring?
Uh, I tend to think, and I'll ask you that same question. I tend to think that coaching is more outcome based, and it probably has more of a professional or ministry specific or outcome specific thing, whether that's a competency that someone wants to grow in, or a strength or a weakness that they're trying to develop, but it tends to be more outcome and maybe vocation specific. I think mentoring gets a little bit more blurred there. And mentoring really is about helping the mentee grow or expand or overcome or face a challenge, irrespective of what the vocational outcome is in
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
it's much more of a personal based investment in someone than where I feel like coaching is more vocational. What would you say though?
Yeah, I think of mentoring as being more personal life oriented.
Mhm.
And often in ministry, it grows out of a ministry challenge. A
Mhm.
person is very frustrated with a particular situation. And what often happens with that is the focus for a person becomes the situation. It's what do I do about that? But really, that uncovers some personal things that could
Mhm.
benefit from some attention.
Sure.
And that's where the mentor can really personalize it and be most helpful.
Yeah. I have a coach that comes alongside me in teaching and preaching and is very specific about things I do or what needs to
Mm,
change or challenge me, on some competencies. When
yeah,
you come around as a mentor, you're asking, how's your heart? Or did you really show up truly as who you are? Just your feedback, your questions are different as a mentor than a
yeah,
coach.
yeah, yeah, they are.
Dick, how have you personally benefited from being mentored throughout your journey? I know you shared 2 years of praying and trying to find someone who
Yeah.
could be a mentor. Maybe it's a story or an example, but how have you benefited personally?
I went into a student ministry in Southern California where there had been a problematic relationship between the senior minister and my predecessor in student ministry, and it had not ended well. Um, so when I came into that, the lead pastor was intent on being sure that our relationship went well. So he had a great outreach to business guys in the community. And there were a group of business people who were accountants and city officials and various type of professionals who met for coffee every morning at 10 o'clock at a coffee shop in town. And
Wow.
right away, he started taking me along with him. So I'm 26, they're 50-ish. And if you say which one of these is not like the others, it was pretty obvious. But we had a 10-minute drive there, and he took me with him every day of the week for about 3 years. So the 10 minutes there and back were really good. I learned a lot from him about his values, about what was important to him. I learned from being around the city leaders he was around. They were great people. They had skills I didn't have. They were way farther along than I did. And just sitting in on their conversations raised the bar for me. So that was a daily investment for 3 years. And finally, I asked to be excused from that because it was really cutting into my workday. And I had a bunch of stuff I needed to get done. And I didn't show up at the office till 9:30. So taking a break at 10, I didn't get my days started very well.
Sure.
But those 3 years were priceless, and they really forged a relationship
Yeah.
between the 2 of us.
Yeah. How have you benefited from being a mentor?
I've learned a ton. I've been around great people, and I think, at this season of my life, I have a friend who says life is lived in 4 20-year segments, and, he looks at the 2 of us and he says, "We're late in the 4th quarter." So, being at this stage of life, um, it is really helpful to me and really enjoyable to be around people younger than myself. Um, it's very different from being around older people who want to talk about the past.
Mm.
Younger people want to talk about the future. And
Yeah.
I just find that stimulating and challenging and exciting to do. And people in different generations tend to see life differently. So my life is so much richer from being around people in each generation than it would be if I were just in a ghetto of people in the 4th quarter. So, it's just great fun.
That's so good. And we need you in each of those quarters. We need the wisdom and experience that you bring. I have two more questions for you, Dick. One is, does everybody need a mentor? What do you think about that?
I think at different stages of life, everybody does. I think a person's life is poorer if they don't have mentors.
Mm.
And it's not that we'll always have a mentor. It's not like we go from one to the next to the next. Most mentoring relationships really are situational. They
Mhm.
come about because of something a person's experiencing and saying, I need help. And really, right now, I am 78 years old. And during this year, I've thought I could use a mentor because there are, getting old isn't for sissies. There are challenges. And I could use somebody who's 85 and has lived through what I'm going through right now
Mhm.
and could help me. And I began to pray about that. God, send me somebody who can mentor me in this season of my life.
I love to hear that. What would you say to anybody who's listening? Maybe this is kind of a final challenge for them. I know that's inspiring to me to hear, even in this season, you're looking for a mentor and want somebody to guide you. What would you say to somebody as a challenge or an inspiration or a next step for them to initiate a mentoring relationship?
Pray and ask. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Yeah, there are always little fears. That's the devil speaking. God wants to connect you with somebody who can walk with you through this season of life.
Yeah, that's so good. Dick, thank you so much
Well, thanks, Gary.
for what you poured out here, but thanks for what you've invested in my life. And I know the countless lives of other pastors and leaders, and for the ways you let us learn from
Yeah,
those challenges and landmines and all that you have
yeah.
navigated in 50 years of local church ministry. It's great.
Well, it's great, and it's a mutual relationship. I learned so much from you and find so much joy from you. So, over the years, as we've connected at different times, it's been terrific, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for joining us here too with the Spire cast community and investing in all of this. I hope those of you who have listened feel challenged and encouraged to reach out and find someone that can mentor you in the season of ministry that you're in, as well as maybe somebody that you could say yes to invest in them a couple of years behind you. Just like Dick said, we all need someone a few years ahead, and that requires all of us to show up and make that investment. I also want to remind you that the Spire leadership event is coming up in Orlando, and it's not too late to register. So, again, this is just a taste of what's to come during that time. The 2022 Spire Conference, September 27th through the 29th in Orlando. You're going to get so much more great resources and equipping just like this. You can head to spire.network for more information about that. Dick, thanks for being with us again today, and we'll see you soon.
Good to see you.
Have a great day, everyone.